This is the DRS train.
Right, so Peter Brook is not with us today. No anthem to start the episode. But with me are Nedzo and Shizzy. How are you guys?
Good.
I'm doing great. A bit sleep deprived, but otherwise doing fine.
Well, good to have you back on the show. I'm Navet Fan, of course. And yeah, what did you think of the Chinese Grand Prix to start with? Because we just got the news this morning that there would be no Saudi Arabian Grand Prix and no Bahrain Grand Prix. So we are going to have 3 races in the next 2 months and a half, which is insane, especially with the current standards of Formula One. And to make it worse, it's, I think, just 2 races in the next 2 months. But yeah, the Chinese Grand Prix, I think, was entertaining, mostly thanks to the Ferraris. Well, what did you guys think? It's a bit controversial. Some people still hate the kind of gimmicky overtakes, and some were entertained. What did you think, Shizzy?
I think, well, firstly, to just touch on the races being cancelled part of the whole thing, it's just, I think the only team that's really upset probably that these races are cancelled is Mercedes, because everybody else is probably very glad that they have some more time to review and to analyze data and make upgrades without Mercedes just building such a big gap. So I think, especially Red Bull, Cadillac, Aston Martin, probably McLaren, really, really glad that they have more time to do all of that. No races for the entirety of April, which is, it's gonna be tough for us fans to make it through. And otherwise, for the race, I think a lot of the sort of worries of the whole community were put to rest at this track, because the first race was in Australia, which was, according to like the analysis of the people who are a lot smarter than me, the third worst track for the battery usage, battery consumption. China is like the 8th best, so this is much more of an average sort of track. And the racing and also just the problems with the clipping and all of that were a lot more manageable, a lot more interesting. And so I'm really glad that this race turned out the way it did.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I've seen a lot of people, and I think I said this in the Australia review, that people were saying it's artificial and that it's not proper racing. And I say to them, I'm pretty sure when Pirelli came in 2011, people were saying that tire saving and DRS and all that sort of stuff is artificial. I mean, DRS obviously is in a way artificial, but nowadays tire saving and drivers who can tire save are considered that is considered a skill. That is considered a tangible skill that can be measured for a driver, saving tires and making sure they're good at the end of a stint. There are some drivers who are good at it and some drivers who aren't. But I think in 5 years' time, especially if this energy saving kind of racing continues, even if it's not in the same way that we see now, I think in 5 years' time, when we get a new engine regulation set, whether that changes the system that we currently have now, we will look back and say, actually, no, engine energy saving and energy management is also a tangible skill for drivers to have. So people saying it's artificial, I think, are jumping on the bandwagon of hate for no reason, because we get great racing. We get racing in places we wouldn't usually see it. We get side by side. Like if it was anything other than battery management and a bit of super clipping, people would be saying this is amazing. We're getting loads of fights to the lead, but people are complaining for no reason, in my opinion. And as for the break that we have, the 2-month break, I guess this means that F1 fans can finally step out of the cave, of the shell, that the wherever they live. Most of the Formula One elitists, should I say, because you have other great motorsport series that you can watch pretty much every week, like NASCAR, IndyCar, or even
Rallying.
Pardon?
Rallying is really good right now with
WEC. Even your local, not local, but like your national series, like for example in Britain, I'll have British touring cars. I'm assuming that other people will have other ones. Like in America, you have all of the other different racing series. Those can fill the void for 2 months. Obviously, not in F1 terms, not in terms of Formula cars, not that sort of stuff. But you've got Super Formula as well. And I think people will start to branch out. But knowing F1 fans will just sit on Twitter for the next 2.5 months complaining that nothing's happening.
I will say
And
it
also,
is. I will say it is very British of you to say that, Nedzo, because yes, unless you're American or British, which are the two countries you mentioned, yeah, if you're Spanish, you go watch Spanish F4 maybe. If you're Italian, there are some like Ferrari Trofeo thingies, but it's not like there are a lot of options either.
I think
Even
the
if you're
V8
European.
supercars need to be mentioned in this
Oh, the
conversation.
supercars, yeah. Well, what about Formula Renault 3.5? That's the French national series.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean there are options, but I agree with you that at least for TV televised series, there are a lot of things to watch at the moment. And yeah, Chizzy, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that just imagine for a second that instead of battery saving and recharging, you have to fuel save because I don't know, because fuel strategy is a thing for now or right now, and it would look the exact same. People would lift off early, lose a lot of speed, and that's how they would enter corners. So it really is just that, you know, people are like, oh well, it's batteries, so it must be terrible. When if it was fuel saving, they would be perfectly fine with it.
It takes me back to there was a tweet that someone put out. I can't remember who it was. It said, "Oh, I wish Formula One was like what it was like back in the '80s, where drivers pushed 100% all the time." And then Martin Brundle replied and said, "Actually, no, we used to fuel save in the '80s just as much as they do nowadays, and we used to keep Formula One has never been about pushing 100% of the time, because up until the '80s, if you pushed 100% all the time, your car just fell to pieces. Just look at Ronnie Peterson. Then in the '90s,
It's actually just a part of the 2000s where like you could have a lot of quali laps back to back, but that's very rare. Like, and there is a reason why people look back fondly on the early 2000s, because that's not something that happened a lot. And people need to realize that, you know, good moments in a sport are good moments. Like, there's a reason why they're good moments. They're not there all the time. Like, yes, we can appreciate them,
yes,
but we can't just always try to come back to them. It's like
Yeah.
it's the same in football. I follow a lot of football, and people are always like, "Oh yeah, this season was so good. Yeah, this season was so good because it was better than the norm." Like, you can't just see the same thing every time.
Yes. I do think most of the hate is unnecessary. There are some things that do need to be sorted out. Like I said, starts still aren't great. There are still people getting bad starts for seemingly no reason. So we do need to see people. We do need to see some development of that. But I think with the extra break that we're going to get, it's actually going to be a blessing in disguise for maybe not the racing action, because I think the teams will do more simulations and all that sort of stuff. But we will see more in the way of was it developing the start mechanisms and that sort. I just think that the pre-start mechanism, you could fix it, but I think it's like 5 seconds now. Just increase it to 10 seconds and give people even more chance to spool up the turbo. Those who have a really good turbo might lose a bit of an advantage because they haven't spooled it up in time. But it's a fine race. Do you want to give the advantage to people who developed a good car, or do you want to see someone eventually, because it will eventually happen, someone go into the back of what is essentially a stalled car?
I think firstly, I'm not that upset about people getting bad starts because having cars out of position will create exciting racing.
Yeah.
Obviously, not to the degree that it is right now, especially with Red Bull powered cars. Obviously, in Australia, Lawson, and in this time, in both races, Verstappen had a terrible start that could have been dangerous. Luckily, nobody crashed into no one at the starts. And also, the reason why I don't think any of the start procedure change will happen is because in the sometime last year, when the regulation sets were clarified, Ferrari pointed out that without the use of the MGU-H to boost the turbo, this is going to be a problem on race starts, and that we should do something about it. We should do a rule change to maybe exactly let the turbos spool up, let us sit there for 5, 10, 15 seconds. And the other teams dismissed it like, nah, I don't think it's going to be a problem. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, blah, blah, blah. And so now when the reality set in that the race starts are indeed a problem, Ferrari are the only team who really developed the car with that in mind, that the race starts are going to be a problem. And so now when the other teams are like, yeah, we want this rule change, Ferrari said, well, we warned you last year and we designed our entire car based on the fact that you didn't want this change. So now we were not going to change our give up advantage just because you didn't even listen to us. You didn't even have to come up with it on your own. You just had to listen to us, and you didn't even do that. And so for that very reason, I don't think the rules are getting changed, because Ferrari were the smart ones. And then on the starts, I just quickly want to add that Aston Martin seems to be also really good at getting starts. So maybe the Honda engine is also one with smaller turbos than the rest of the grid.
RB as well. I think RB also gets forgotten, and that's why Red Bull doesn't really make sense to me, because that's two races in a row where Lindblad has got an insane start. Lawson struggled in the first race, as we know, but today he also had a good start. And meanwhile, Verstappen and Hadjar are struggling, which doesn't really make sense to me.
I think this is a good time to. We've talked about Australia, which is a really power or energy hungry track. We've talked about China, which is somewhere in the middle. I think what I'm excited about is Suzuka in 2 weeks, or is it in 1 week?
2.
It's 2 weeks.
I think.
I want to see, because Suzuka in recent years, has become kind of similar to what Spa and Monza is, where Spa and Monza are, where because of the over-reliance on DRS, the cars couldn't overtake each other. I want to see what happens at Suzuka, because it was always the case. Suzuka has a long straight, a nice bit of track where you can get lovely momentum, get right behind a car. But because you weren't allowed to use DRS up to and through 130R, there's no one able to overtake, because you haven't got the overspeed. I want to see what happens with a track like Suzuka, which I think it's weird for energy deployment, because obviously you have the entire first sector, and arguably not the entire, up until the hairpin really, so the entire first half of the lap, that's just going to be pure energy saving. That is going to be apart from the short shoot between Degner 2 and the hairpin, it's all, and maybe from Dunlop until Degner 1, you're going to be saving as much as you can, because you have the run up to Spoon, the run up to 130R, and the Casio Triangle, and then the run to Turn 1. So I have a feeling that we could get racing similar to what we've seen in previous years at Jeddah, where because there's 3 consecutive back-to-back-to-back straights, you just get crazy side-by-side racing. And I mean, I want to see Suzuka do well, because it's a good circuit and it's got loads of history and all of that sort of stuff. And this could be the answer. I mean, I've said in previous years I've made a quote unquote F1 manifesto, and in that I said I wanted a yearly alternate between Suzuka and Fuji. But maybe if Suzuka proves its worth with these new regulations, we can hold off on that idea for now. I think that Suzuka will be a good test of these regulations, because if we can get to a point where circuits that previously sucked balls for racing in the late DRS era, then we can get excited for places like Monaco, places like Miami, maybe not Miami, but other tracks that are Hungary is one of them. Yeah, Hungary, Singapore, those kind of places.
Yeah. So
definitely.
Japan is the 4th worst track in terms of power consumption, so it's just a tiny bit better than Australia. Yeah, actually. So the worst one is Jeddah, and then it's Monza, Australia, Japan, Qatar, and the best ones are Monaco, Mexico, Singapore, Azerbaijan, and Hungary. So those will be the best tracks.
I'm assuming
that Azerbaijan should be interesting. I want to see Sector 2.
I think the reason why stuff like Baku isn't as high, even though it's got longer straights, is because the straights are pretty like there is stuff in between that you can properly save energy. And like the end of the long main straight, you have 2 heavy-ish braking zones, or 1 heavy braking zone, 1 medium-sized braking zone, and then you have, after the next straight, you have an entire sector, and then you have a lot of stops in between. Whereas in Suzuka, you've got Spoon Corner, which is nowadays 5th gear, 4th gear. You have 130, which is completely flat, and that entire run down to the Casio Triangle, which is 2nd gear, I suppose, you just don't have much chance to regen. I think people will be super clipping a lot towards the end of, maybe, if not through 130R and down towards the chicane, down towards Turn 1 as well. I think that's the problem. There isn't enough space to regen, and I think that's why Jeddah is a problem, for example, because you just have no time to actually get on the brakes.
Yeah, I think I'm also interested to see how they will handle 130R in terms of the straight mode settings, because I'm not sure if they are going to allow the cars to take 130R with straight mode enabled. And so will there be like a triggered point where the wings automatically shut, because or the drivers will have to do it manually, and I know how that will work. And go on, Nedzo.
I was going to say, to be fair, the problem with DRS was when you turn into a corner with the DRS open, you have a lot of rear downforce. If you have a lot of rear downforce and a lot of front downforce, it will balance it out. So although it could be the case that if you try to use it, you just go straight on because there's no turning grip. But it could be the case that because it's balanced, although it's shit, you might have to like lift off or whatever, and there might just be less downforce. It could be the case that you could actually do it. Or what you might do is you might see drivers literally do a tiny little dab of the brakes just so that they can get the wings active, because I'm not sure if it's actuated the same way that DRS is, where as soon as you hit the brakes it deactivates.
I think it is.
Yeah, so then what you might see is, especially on qualifying laps where you're not right in front of or behind a driver, you might see someone literally just slightly dab the brakes, get that extra downforce, and straight back into straight mode as soon as they're straightened up on the exit of the corner.
The reason why I don't think that will happen is because, or I don't think they will allow it to be that way, is because I don't know if you remember the morning of the qualifying for Australia, the drivers tried to make it so that the entire run from turn 6 to turn 10 was not straight mode enabled, because they felt the cars were really nervous at the speeds they were doing with straight mode enabled, and they wanted it to be changed. And the FIA said, okay, we'll change it, and then all the teams got involved. That would mean we have to reprogram literally everything, and then the FIA changed it back, so there was a straight mode there. And so if drivers felt really unconfident in the car throughout just those tiny bends, then 130R is a massive turn compared to that. So especially since they will be doing probably around 330 if they don't start to clip, which they probably will start to clip, but even then they'll be doing probably over 280 with the wings open. And yeah, the cars definitely can take that turn at that speed. So maybe it will just become a really high speed corner like P1 is, maybe. Or maybe they will force it to close. I don't know. Or my worst fear is that they will just make it so that the entire run from Spoon to 130R will be non-straight mode, which I really hope doesn't happen, because that would make the energy consumption even worse. And yeah, I wouldn't want to see that.
Right, well, let's talk about the team that's most likely to go very fast in Japan, and that's Mercedes. And I think a good way to start is just to talk about Mr. Antonelli. I think just before talking about what happened in the races, the fact that we have we witnessed the youngest ever pole sitter this weekend, and the second youngest race winner. Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, have a little discussion and prediction on what you think lies ahead for him. Because when you look at the list of youngest pole sitters, the entire top 6 is made up of some very, very good drivers. Actually, the entire top 10, there's Lance Stroll and Andrea Cesaris there, who are still like good drivers. But there are some like very, very good drivers there. And then in the list of the youngest race winners as well, kind of the same names as you see as with the pole sitters: Vettel, Leclerc, Alonso, Lewis. Yeah, well, what do you think is lying ahead for him? Is it going to be a title? Is he going to have a Leclerc career of a lot of race wins and a lot of potential without actually having the setup to win? This is a very loose prediction, of course, but just wanted to know what you think, Nedzo.
I hate to fence it, but I think that we can't truly know, because we saw this last year with Kimi when there were races where he was genuinely better than Russell. We saw it in Brazil, we saw it in Las Vegas, and there were a couple of other races where he was sort of there or thereabouts. Like Canada, he wasn't better, but he was there or thereabouts. It's a case of how much his consistency improves from last year. If this performance is his average performance. He's gonna go all the way to the bank this year. But if his performance is like once in every 2 races, once in every 3 races, he's still going to be good, but it's obviously less concrete as to what's going to happen. Obviously, this is still his second season. Like, just look at like people wrongly call Lewis Hamilton the GOAT. Look at him in 2008. The amount of dumb errors he made that year on his way to a title. It was incredible. So Kimi has allowed mistakes, and like, yes, he's in a championship-winning car. Yes, he's a protege, but he's allowed to make these errors because if he doesn't, he just won't become a better driver. I mean, unless your name is Alain Prost or Juan Manuel Fangio or Jim Clark, who are just pretty much immune to errors. Every single driver has made mistakes or had bad races in their like competitive prime years. So Kimi has allowed those errors. What stands for him? As you say, if this is his performance ceiling, maybe not a championship, but definitely a lot of race wins to come. But if this is just the beginning, he could go all the way to the moon or the sky or wherever Jack Doohan's car ends up at Suzuka, which is usually in a barrier. But you get what I'm saying. It's I think it's too early to predict where Kimi's career is going to go 2 races into his second season. But on the basis of this, I don't think he's winning the title this year. I think Russell could perform at 95% and still be comfortably clear of him just on pure consistency because he is one of those drivers who is just delivers every single week, even if it's not at 100%. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think it's kind of would be unfair to give this win to Antonelli because of how good he was. I think what needs to be stated is that this win is more of a circumstances for Russell just hampered him so much that Antonelli, all he had to do was just be safe and just get around the track 56 times without crashing into a wall and with like some performance, and then he would win because Russell obviously was on the back foot because of the issue in qualifying, and then for the race he had to murder his tires to get past the Ferrari. So I think Antonelli is clearly still incredible driver, still not even 20 years old. So he still has a lot of room to improve. I think if we sort of look at how drivers who are as young as him and actually had a chance to stay in the sport and weren't Lance Stroll, the only other example really is Max Verstappen and maybe I guess Vettel. And then if you just look at them, then clearly he still has a few years to go before he manages to hit his prime. I think, in a year or two, we'll see how good he can actually be. So the fact that he is already at this level where if he's given the chance to clean up the sort of easier victory, it's still not an easy one, but an easier one, he can confidently do that with basically 0 mistakes, then the sky is the limit. So I think, if things just go a bit worse for Russell over the year, like he just gets a bit unluckier sometimes with safety cars, with maybe some reliability problems, we can see Antonelli fighting for the title. But I think if both drivers have sort of equal opportunities, then this isn't still. I don't think there's going to be really much of a title challenge by Antonelli.
I'm going to quickly. I think that you weren't particularly fair to Antonelli in that saying that it wasn't really not necessarily not a win on merit. I know that's not what you were saying, but I think that, and I'd have to wait for all the Twitter nerds, those guys that say clean air pace over the entire race. But I think that the gap between George and Kimi was pretty negligible because I know you can say that George destroyed his tires. But when he got passed into second place, I believe he was like 7.5 seconds behind Kimi. And then before Kimi decided to go to Narnia and back on the exit of the hairpin, he was about 9 seconds ahead, which is, again, it's only 2 seconds over the course of 40 laps. But I think that the gap between them was negligible. If there was an advantage in George's favour, it's maybe a tenth, which I don't think is enough to say that Kimi didn't fully deserve that win because, like, we've seen it with many drivers who had their first opportunity at something big and they just crumble under the pressure. Vettel, we talked about him as his kind of young driver. Fuji 2007. I mean, looking back on it, that probably wasn't his fault as much as it was Hamilton's. But there have been so many drivers who've crumbled at the first sight of their victory. I mean, there are drivers who are clearly much better than everyone else, like Maldonado, who didn't do that. But that's the kind of level we're talking about.
Yeah, I think Antonelli was slightly slower than Russell, and definitely the racing was deserved. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly happy to see somebody on the top of the charts that isn't named George Russell, because if I'm being honest, I think this is going to be sort of a curiosity of this year when somebody not named George Russell wins the session that actually counts. So I'm incredibly happy that Antonelli managed to get his first win, and I hope that this sort of relieves a bit of like that pressure that now he has his first one. It's also in like very clean conditions, like it wasn't like sort of Piastri's first win where it was give the position back type of victory that I don't think he really felt he earned that victory properly. Antonelli, I think, really feels like that, and so that could give him a big boost in terms of just his psychological psyche.
Yeah, honestly, I also thought that we'd see Russell 24 times winning a race this season, and that won't happen because Antonelli won, and also there aren't 24 races this season in the end. But yeah, let's talk about George because he had a good weekend. You said the right thing there that he is still the favorite, and I think everyone agrees on that. We hope that Antonelli will be competing, but if we're honest, Russell is in his ninth. Eighth?
I was just say he's in his prime. You can just say he's in his prime. You don't have to say exactly the season.
Anyway, he's in his eighth season because he won in 2018 in Formula 2. Eighth season, and that's usually where, as you said, that's your prime. I believe he's born in 98, so he's going to be 28. That's like your absolute prime, I would say, as a Formula 1 driver. And there's not going to be a better opportunity for him. He's got a very good teammate who's a rookie. Well, not a rookie. He's 19, second season rookie. I think it's his second season, but I feel like he still is very much a rookie in my eyes in terms of his inconsistency and how he himself treats this step of his career. So yeah, Russell needs to win the season, and as Chizzy mentioned at the start, there might be an issue for Mercedes because there's going to be a lot of time between races until May. Ferrari might sort their stuff out, Red Bull might catch up, and that might be a bit of an issue for George. So I think he'll be happy with what happened this weekend, especially when it really looked like in Q3 he would be starting P10. The kind of issue he was complaining with when you stop your car in Q3 and you're not moving anymore, I thought it was done. So in the end, P2 was good. I think he would have finished third or fourth if he had started 10th. So yeah, I guess the only thing we can really say on him is that he is definitely the odds-on favorite for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for Russell, just I think a very weird weekend because there's still clearly a gap between Mercedes and Ferrari in terms of like long run pace, but then at the beginning of stints, like Russell and Antonelli really had to fight for their life with the Ferraris because they're like clearly the Ferrari is there at the beginning of a stint, and then maybe due to tire usage, maybe, or maybe just the car getting a different balance with lower fuel. Maybe that's the reason. So I'm not exactly sure why that happens, but why there's such a gap that just sort of randomly formulates. They seemingly are equal for like 10, 15 laps, and then within a few laps there's a second delta that just gets built up, and then every single lap is just hopelessly fast for the Mercedes are hopelessly fast. So Russell, I think he did a good weekend of damage limitation. Once he had that issue in qualifying, he was barely got around to do his push lap, so he did great to just get a lap that's good enough for the front row at the worst. And then in the race, he just took no risks, played it safe, waited for everything to settle down, and then slowly used the pace advantage to just get that sort of easy second place that is probably expected from the second Mercedes driver at every weekend. So I think, unless something major happens, we just saw a very clear demonstration that a Mercedes 1-2 is basically guaranteed.
I also just want to specify that when they were running in quali and in sprint, apart from Q3, Russell was consistently 3 times clear of Antonelli, and I think that really needs to be mentioned because obviously Antonelli had a good weekend. He did what he had to do during the race, but 3 tenths is a lot. And we know, as we said, that Russell is in his prime and Kimi Antonelli is starting his second season, but 3 tenths is not the kind of gap you just make up, especially in those cars. I feel like a lot of the gaps are quite tight, apart from Gasti Colapinto. But looking at the Ferraris, looking at the Red Bulls, obviously Hadjar, I think is a much better driver than Tsunoda and all, but Hadjar is less than 3 times away from Max. So yeah, I think there's some nuancing here. I'm not saying that Antonelli is slow. He had a great weekend, but I feel like a lot of people are forgetting that he was consistently 3 tenths off George in every single qualifying session. Yes, Nedzo.
I initially wanted to make a point on the performance of Mercedes and Ferrari, but I'll quickly answer your point on Antonelli. I think that Antonelli's 3 tenths, I think, comes around in a different way to other drivers like Hadjar, and I'm going to explain why. From what I see from Hadjar's onboards and from his general demeanor, he seems like a relaxed, smooth, and yes, we've seen, for example, this weekend, I think he had a go at Kimi, I believe, for like impeding him in qualifying or practice or something. But generally, he's quite a smooth driver, and as a result, him being 2 tenths off of Max doesn't surprise me because unless he's underperforming like the braking and the accelerating capabilities of that car and the lines, he's not gonna be that far off of Max because he's constantly on that limit of grip, which is what these cars need. Whereas because these cars are so much more fragile, you have to, not fragile, but they're so much more twitchy, you need to be smoother. And I think that Antonelli is a bit more ragged in his approach to driving, or not ragged, that makes it seem like it's more aggressive in his approach to driving. So every little micro correction he has that loses him, even if it's just a quarter, a half of a tenth, is going to stack up over a lap. And I don't think Kimi is losing 3 tenths to George on pure pace, just not executing the lap. I think he's doing it because he slightly over pushes, especially on the limit of a qualifying lap. He can't pick that last 1% up, and he goes slightly over. And once you go slightly 1% over the limit of a car like the 2026 Formula One cars, you will really struggle. Is why guys like Schumacher, for example, were able to be good in every era he was, because although he was considered like one of the most aggressive drivers in history, I don't really is not in a way that everyone else does. It's why Prost, for example, was elite. Is why Fangio was elite. Is why Jim Clark was elite. They all have smooth driving styles because they're just able to adapt. Back to what I was going to say about Ferrari and Mercedes, because Chizzy said that he wasn't sure where Ferrari fall off in the later part of it. I think it is just because when you are like 1 or 2 tenths behind or 3 tenths behind a car in pure pace, you can keep with them on the short runs, even because the tire wear is pretty similar and everything is pretty equal. If you have good racecraft, but once tire wear starts to become a factor, especially when you are mostly behind in the battles, and when car performance properly starts to come in towards the middle and the end of it, and that's where drivers will tend to fall off, especially when their teams say, "Oh, you're below your tire delta, you're below your fuel delta. Back off a little, please." And that's where all these factors come together and make sure that Ferrari don't ever beat Mercedes on a long run. I think they just need to work on. I think if you can work on tire saving capabilities and a couple of things, maybe even trying to make your starts even better or your acceleration out of corners even better, because then you can think, actually, no, I'm going to go back on that. Actually, I think that the team that gets the energy deployment correct, because if you can mitigate super clipping and if you can mitigate, or if you can extend the amount of energy that you save under braking, if you can have a full battery at the end of a straight when another driver has 80%, you're Gucci. You're going to absolutely fly off into the distance. And if you can mitigate super clipping, that's going to be at least a second a lap.
Well, you've transitioned well into Ferrari here, so let's just talk about how their weekend went, because Leclerc and Hamilton, they were the talk of the race in the end. So much tossing and under and over, just stuff that we usually love in Formula One, especially between two teammates, especially also when we know that those two teammates are of the quality that they are, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. And it was very clean. They didn't touch. It was very close racing, and both of them enjoyed it as well. Leclerc was saying that the battle was quite fun. And yeah, in terms of performance, they are clearly the second fastest. But as we've already mentioned, they're quite a bit off Mercedes on race pace and also quali, to be fair. Lewis made mistakes in quali, it must be said. And apparently he could have gotten second in quali, but anyway, it does not matter because he was first by turn one. And yeah, good battles between the two drivers, but more work to do if they want to challenge Mercedes realistically.
Yeah, I think for Lewis, obviously I usually just get straight into bashing him. I'll wait until the end of my point to get into bashing him. But this start of 2026 has been, it's not a return to the old, it's not prime Lewis Hamilton, but instead of doing what he's been doing since 2020, basically.
Something you said there, I've seen it so much on social media, like, oh, we're back to prime Lewis. No, this is very good Lewis, confident Lewis. It's not prime Lewis. I follow a certain driver called Fernando Alonso. You don't hit your prime again after 40. Let's be honest.
Yeah, so I consider this Lewis to be sort of similar to. We have to go through more races to truly see what his sample size of, whether this is his average performance or whether this is his lowest or highest performance, whatever. I see this as similar to kind of 2018, 2019 Lewis, because some maybe not 2018, sorry, maybe 2017, 2019, 2020 Lewis, because people see those as his best seasons when they're obviously not. He made several mistakes in all of those years, but like the average pacing I'm talking about, because he was close to Leclerc in both races. He wasn't quicker. People are saying that he was quicker in Australia than Leclerc. No, he wasn't. It's just that he was able to sit behind while Leclerc was battling other cars. And this race, I think he was slightly faster, especially in that last stint where he just managed to pull like a tenth or so a lap. But yeah, I think it is important to mention that China is. It's arguably Lewis's best track. I think it's top three definitely, but it's arguably even his best circuit along with Canada.
I also said that to a few Lewis fans that I know that, yes, Lewis did very well. I mean, he did well. There's no denying that, but China is one of his best tracks. That is for sure. Even last year, we saw how he did last year.
Yes. So I think I'll hold back on saying that he's somehow back. I mean, what annoys me? People saying, "Oh, why doesn't it?" Because apparently there are people online who think that Lewis isn't getting enough for how well he's performing at his age. Like, I don't know if people are dumb or if they're forgetful or if what. Did they forget what Alonso did in 2023? Did they forget what Nigel Mansell's done in Nigel Mansell did in 1994? Did they forget what Jack Brabham did in 1970? Did they forget what Jacques Lafitte
did in 1950? No, I'm joking.
but I'm talking about modern history where drivers were like drivers have performed into their fault. And bearing in mind, in past years, like for example with Lafitte, with Mansell, if you were a Formula One driver in the 1980s or 1990s and you were over the age of 35, you were very fucking good, because most drivers would retire by the age of 35 because of the fitness levels and stuff. The fitness wasn't as good, and it meant that when you were younger, obviously you're just generally more fit. So when you get to that older age, your fitness falls off a lot harder, and therefore your performance level falls off a lot harder. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Lewis being good at 41 is nothing special, because we've seen it with Vettel, for example. He, at the age of 35, wasn't as good as Lewis is now. But it's not outstanding. It's like when people say that his 2007 season is the best rookie season of all time. It's not. There are better seasons. but that doesn't make it not out. That doesn't make it not good. That doesn't make it not great. I just
You forget that in sports discussion in 2026, you're either the GOAT or you're washed. So either you're saying that 2007 is the best rookie season, or you are a hater and you're massively underrating him. You need to understand that those are the two levels.
Yeah.
So you're just.
I do want to wait for the rest of the season though. Japan, I think, is unless I'm remembering wrong, Japan isn't really a great circuit for Lewis. Then after Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, we have, I think it's Miami after that. He's been shit there. I want to see what he does there. Monaco, he's not outstanding there. You've got Spain and Canada. Spain is kind of average. Canada, he's going to do well, I think. As long as he perform, he can do what Ocon or Hulkenberg does, which is perform excellently 5 races out of a year, and then the rest of them kind of be average. I think at the age of 41, I'll accept that as kind of like a respectable performance. I think that if Ferrari does get closer to Mercedes, a win could be on the cards, and then if he can get like 1 win and Leclerc gets 3, that's also respectable. But yeah, I don't. Lewis is definitely better than he was last year. He's definitely better than he's been at least since 2020, with the exception of 23, of course. But
also, yeah, those starts are the starts of a guy who A, is confident, B, trusts his car.
Yeah, I think that
is not something we've seen for a while.
I do think that the ground effect cars did kind of mitigate his capabilities, because, and I talked about cars that are very fine on the edge. These cars are fine on the edge of grip, but they handle in a normal way. There are some cars you will drive, as I can say this as a professional sim racer and part-time karter, when you feel a car that isn't that you can feel that it's got good handling characteristics, but it's not fully there, or that it's handling slightly differently to how you'd expect. When you're having to predict what a car or a kart is going to do going into a corner, you're just that little bit more hesitant and you don't commit with as much confidence. And that's what happened with Lewis last year. Admittedly, that's his own. We speak about drivers' adaptability and their ability to perform in all conditions, like Prost, like Schumacher, like Clark, like Fangio. And this is part of the reason why we can't consider Kimi Raikkonen to be, or I can't consider Kimi Raikkonen to be in the top 10 drivers of all time, because yes, 2002 to 2009, fantastic, but 2012 to 2021, he wasn't there, and he didn't have the adaptability to handle cars that weren't extremely positive on the front end and gave him exactly what
Karen Smith has unsubscribed from his own podcast. Chizzy, what did you think about Lewis this weekend, and Charles also? Even though I feel there's not much to say on Charles. He was there, he did his job, and he got beaten by Lewis today in that game of overtakes. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think, I'm also not the biggest fan of Hamilton, but just seeing him last year, like, I really felt sorry for him, which I never thought I would ever feel sorry for Lewis Hamilton. But yeah, I really did feel sorry for him, because he just looked so like broken and like somebody who just wanted to give up everything, because he really was like on the edge of what he could take mentally. And then this year he's smiling, he's positive. And then also Leclerc is probably the first time I've ever seen a driver lose in a fair fight and say that I enjoyed this so much, and just give props to the other person without saying that, oh, he did this, he's dirty, that's why he beat me, I'm better. He just he was, he just appreciated how good the racing was, which, I think that's a really confident thing, to be able to admit that you were, I think, that just you got beaten fairly, but say that you enjoyed the battle. So I think that's a really positive sign for both of them. And then also on the topic of, like Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren clear the top 3. It's really weird how in qualifying Mercedes generates this gigantic gap, and then McLaren is basically as fast as Ferrari. But then in the races, Ferrari is almost as fast as the Mercedes on the short runs, and then the McLaren is a lot slower. And so it's kind of, I don't know, it seems counterintuitive that seemingly on the short runs, the Mercedes engine is worse than it is in qualifying, but then on the long runs, the engine is better than in the short runs. So I have no idea how that could happen. But yeah, I think Ferrari is a team that they're going to be really appreciate the fact that there's no races for the entirety of April, and just work out some of their problems to hopefully close the gap to Mercedes a bit more. Because if they could hang on maybe another 10 laps, then who knows, that at that point maybe you can get some strategy involved, you can do something else. So if they manage to close the gap a little bit more, this could be a really excellent fight.
Yeah, I also saw that Lewis might be getting a new race engineer, a guy who's leaving McLaren, so that might help him as well. And yeah, you mentioned McLaren there. I think usually we go team by team in order of the race standings, but I am not going to do that. I'm going to talk about McLaren because I think they're clearly third fastest, and they didn't race today at all, which we haven't seen in so long from a top team. Obviously, last race you had a few non-starters, but McLaren haven't started today, and I hadn't followed it at all until the start. So I just went on my stream, and I just saw an empty third row, and I was extremely confused. But yeah, constructors champions last year and did not start the second race. And as you said, Chizi, they're not that far from Ferrari in quali, and then they are in the actual race. Well, from what we saw in the sprint, it's hard to understand what's going on because they have the same engine as Mercedes, but the other Mercedes powered cars. Well, we saw Alpine do better this race than last. Williams are nowhere. We thought before the season started, or at least I saw a lot of reports saying that this would be heavily engine reliant. So once we know what engine works best, the other customer teams would also be quite high, a bit like in 2014. And unless McLaren chassis is absolutely terrible, which I don't think it is, they are relatively underperforming, and they're in this lull of third best team where they're quite far from Ferrari. And I think in a normal situation where they are racing, they would be quite easily fifth and sixth. So yeah, it's a bit hard to know where they go from here. Obviously, they're going to try to go up, but Ferrari seem to be closer to closing the gap to Mercedes than McLaren. Also, yeah, I feel like it's going to be a bit of a boring year for Norris and Piastri. One thing I will say is that Norris was fast over the weekend, and then Piastri beat him in Q3. So some talking, well, I feel like there are some talking points, but also some non-talking points. It's a bit. Well, what do you make of it, Chizzy? It's a bit of a weird one, but one thing for sure is they didn't start the race, and that's quite big.
Yeah, and it's maybe even worse is that the two issues were completely different and unrelated. Why they didn't start the race, so it wasn't that they had something in common fail and then they can just fix that. There were multiple things that went wrong. Yeah, I mean, I don't think McLaren really is underperforming that much because obviously they had a week with the engine. They got it on basically like Friday afternoon or like the Friday morning from Mercedes last week in Australia, and since then they had to come up with ideas on how to extract even more performance with the engine management and the engine mapping.
Was it that
What?
recent?
Yes. Yeah. I mean the current spec of the engine. Yes. They all of the customer teams got their first hands-on experience in Australia. So
Oh, right.
they're going to improve, I think, a lot. Again, a team that's going to really be helped by this break because they can just spend a lot of time running tests on the engine, finding out what they can do to just extract even more performance out of it.
That's a
So
very good point, and we know from previous years that McLaren have been good at developing.
yeah, and I think the chassis is a bit disappointing. I was hoping that they would be on par with Mercedes just in terms of aerodynamics based on what they did last year, but this year I don't know, they just sort of couldn't manage to get there. So it's really weird, not having the third best team start the race like at all, and then also two other cars didn't start the race. Like four cars weren't lined up, which means that for 3 race starts now, we never had more than 20 cars. So we still haven't seen more than 20 cars start the race since 2016. So I'm hoping that would change, because it would be really good if people could actually start races. But yeah, McLaren are a bit of a nothing burger at this point. They can't really challenge the front runners. They aren't slow enough to be caught up in the midfield, and their drivers are kind of equal, not really destructive. So I don't know. They still, Piastri obviously didn't take part in the first race at all, and then didn't take part in the second race at all. So this year Piastri has a grand total of 0 race starts after 2 races, which is, I don't think that's really ever happened in like a top team, where and when a driver just, for reasons that weren't like an injury or something like that, made the qualified but then couldn't make the start for some reason. So yeah, it's just really weird. And then also, I mean, Red Bull really struggled a lot, but if they can improve, this could really come back to haunt McLaren. This potential 20-something points between the two drivers that they sort of threw away by not being able to make the start, because let's be real, a 5th and the 6th place were guaranteed if they just managed to go around the whole race.
I'll tell you what is funny. The fact that, just like in 2009, the two teams that were dominant or very, very, very successful in the previous year have just fallen off. And McLaren and Red Bull have done what McLaren and Ferrari did in 2009. It is kind of funny, and I do like it. I do like the fact that Norris and Piastri, now they're not in a rocket ship, are just kind of there or thereabouts. And I mean, I don't really like. It's not that I don't like. I think that Verstappen is the best driver in F1, so him being down fighting in the lower reaches of the points is a bit shit. But it's happened before, and it's going to continue to happen in some seasons. So I'm not particularly too pissed. It could happen again.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And again, usually we go by race standings, but I feel like there's a clear order to look at things here, because you just mentioned Verstappen, and I really want to talk about Red Bull right after McLaren, because they were the title contenders last year. Red Bull, again, they are in the middle of... They're not in the middle of nowhere. They are actually kind of racing, but they are nowhere near where they wanted to be, I think. Verstappen is not liking this at all. He announced a few days ago that he would be competing at the 24 hours of the Nürburgring. People are, I think, extrapolating a bit too much from this, saying that, oh, this is his transition to leaving Formula One. I think we can calm down a bit. I know that he has shown interest towards other categories, but don't think he's done, especially not mid-season. So people are like, oh yeah, he's going to race there and then just leave in July or something. That's not going to happen. So yeah, Red Bull, they were beaten by Gasly, and in the race they were beaten by the RBs. We're going to talk about that later, those midfield cars who have really shown up in China. But talking about internally Red Bull, Hadjar is doing well, quite close to Verstappen. And Verstappen is not liking it at all. Is not liking the cause at all, which is fair. So, yeah, do you think Red Bull is going to be improving? We need to remember that they have a new engine, and that if you take that into account, they're not doing that badly.
The only way is up with Red Bull. They obviously were on the back foot because they clearly developed towards all the end of 2025. They clearly developed as late as they possibly could last year. They also, as you said, have a new engine, so that's going to improve as well. So the only way is up in terms of car performance. One thing I will say about Hadjar is his start to the year has been immaculate. He's been arguably the best of any teammate Verstappen's had since Ricciardo. But, and we've said this before, like, remember at the start of 2022 when Perez was performing well, people were saying, finally, we've got someone who can finally be Verstappen's number 2 driver who isn't a million seconds off pace. And then we even had it to an extent with Albon when he nearly won in Brazil, when he had a good result, when he nearly had a good result in Austria. But then when a driver gets later on into their time as teammates with Verstappen, whether it be towards the end of a season or whatever, they just fall off. We haven't seen that with Hadjar because we haven't had a chance to. I want to say, and I said this in Australia, I said this in the Australia Race Report as well. I want to see what happens when he's in Hungary, Spa, Monza. I want to see what happens when we get towards Qatar and Abu Dhabi if those tracks haven't been destroyed by missiles. But you get what I mean. I'm happy with what Hadjar's doing at the moment. He's respectable in qualifying. He's doing okay in the races, although he shouldn't. Was it he? Did he? Yeah, he spun it. He spun it. He nearly took out the greatest driver that could be in Formula One history. But nonetheless, yeah, obviously. I think we can see some of the heebie-jeebies that come along with that Red Bull second seat starting to creep in. Hadjar can either park them and not let that get in his way, or we'll just see Verstappen say, I want the car sharper, I want the car sharper, I want the car sharper. And then Hadjar will just have to be like half a second off of his pace, and he can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I think you can make a realistic argument that this weekend Red Bull were the 7th fastest car, and that wouldn't be outrageous to make that the top 3 teams, and then Haas, Visa RB, or whatever they are called, Minardi, and Alpine are all faster than them. So clearly, yeah, they can only go up. But I have a lot of trust in them, because last year in Hungary they were incredibly similar. With the performance of Max, he also got beaten by Lawson in that race, finished I think 8th or 9th, and still managed to become basically the fastest car within 10 races. And so I think Red Bull definitely have a lot of ways to improve. And then obviously Max retired in Australia, Hadjar retired, so clearly there's still a lot of reliability problems. But otherwise, I think solid races by both. Verstappen had horrid starts in both in the sprint and the main race. So I hope it was just a car issue that will be figured out easily and not become a problem. So I don't know. Red Bull is another team that they will need. I just need to see more to see what happens, because in Australia they were clearly the 3rd fastest team, obviously faster than McLaren, and then here they were, I don't know, they were 7th fastest. Like, if you want to be really generous, they were the 4th fastest. So it's still very unclear as to what they're doing. And then Hadjar is he's starting to make some mistakes, but he's still being overall a lot better than Tsunoda or Perez was in the last 2-3 years. So
yeah, my kind of take was, oh yeah, he spun from P8 when Tsunoda and Lawson were spinning from P17. So I'd rather have my driver spin in P8 and go back into the top 10.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like, again, usually we transition team by team in terms of the race standings. I'm really edging Nedzo to talk about Behrman here, but we're not going to talk about Haas. We're going to transition to the other Red Bull sister team. I think that's the best thing to do here, because we just talked about how somehow RB are doing better. Also, RB are kind of, the successor to Chizzy's countrymen. Well, fellow countrymen's only full-time seasons team when Baumgartner was at Minardi. So there's that. But 22 years later, they are beating Red Bull. And I think that's quite unexpected, especially from Lawson, because I feel like Lawson, he really gets he gets dealt a bad hand of cards when, he struggles like any other driver, but whenever he struggles, he's the first one that people want to kick out of the sport. And I don't like Lawson, by the way, but every time he makes a mistake, he's the first guy that people want to get rid of. And I understand that it's a very competitive grid right now, and that even the bad drivers are actually good. But yeah, Lawson today, P7, very good result, and ahead of the Red Bulls. So if you think about quali as well, like everyone was talking about Lindblad last race, he has beaten Lindblad in the 2 first quali sessions of the year, which obviously Lindblad is a rookie, but if you're rating Lindblad that highly, you also need to give credit to Lawson. So yeah, P7 for Lawson and P12 for Lindblad.
Quickly before Chizzy jumps in, I'm just going to say, you talked about the Red Bulls being beaten by the Red Bulls being beaten by the Minardis. Surely, if we're talking about Baumgartner, it's not a Red Bull, it's a Jaguar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also, I just like to mention that we didn't need to wait 22 years to see the Red Bulls beaten. 2008 also managed to produce a season where Minardi beat the Jaguar, or the Toro Rosso beat the Red Bull. So yeah, that wasn't unique. Also, I think Arvid Lindblad is a great way to highlight just how ridiculous the longevity of Hamilton and Alonso are. Because can one of you tell me what happened in the qualifying for the 2007 Hungarian Grand Prix?
No, nothing happened. I don't remember. Alonso was the fastest driver, and for some reason he started P10. So God knows.
P6.
Yeah. So that happened, and then 4 days later, that happened, and then 4 days later, Arvid Lindblad was born.
I was close.
So that just puts into perspective, I think, how incredible the longevity of these two are. And then also, I think with Lindblad, it needs to be mentioned that since the feeder formulas don't go here, he's literally never driven on the track. He had 2 installation laps in practice before the car broke down, and so he essentially entered SQ1 with his first push lap being the 4th time he's ever completed a lap around the circuit. So, I think that needs to be mentioned, that he went into this with absolutely zero experience. And still, I think he managed to, not completely embarrass himself, didn't kill anybody. So, definitely a difficult weekend for him. But I think, he still managed to not be awful, and I think that's all that people expected of him. And then Lawson is he was just really good. So I don't know. Obviously, he had an issue with the battery in Australia, I think, so that's why he struggled there so much. But if Lawson can put on these type of performances, and then Lindblad can have a practice session to lap the circuit a few times, RB can be really, really up there at the top of the midfield.
I think I would just like to say, I think when we were talking about the 4 days old point, it reminded me, I can't remember which video it was now, but Peter made a video talking about all of the drivers, and somehow he had a screenshot. We might be able to get it up if Con can put it up on the screen of Ollie Behrman and I think it was Kimi Antonelli having a sperm race, as with their faces on little sperm tails.
Maybe. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
That's I guess you can say that. Yeah. Who do we wanna move on to?
Now I think it's time to finally let Nedzo. Well, I want to talk about Haas and Alpine together because both of them had a driver who was very fast, and the other, Colapinto had his. Do we agree it was Colapinto's best race in F1?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in terms of actual performance, yes. Maybe in terms of circumstances with like his inexperience in 2024, you could argue, but overall best race, yes.
So Haas and Alpine 5th and 6th with Behrman and Gasly. Colapinto did very well. Ocon didn't do well, but yeah. Nedzo, what do you make of this Behrman P5? That's a big result.
It is a big
result.
result.
Perhaps you can take us through Gasly's P6 so we can keep moving.
It is a big result. I believe that we know how fast Behrman can be. I'd say I said this in Australia, and I'll say this again. I think genuinely he's top 5 fastest drivers on the grid. He might lose out on consistency. He might lose out on execution, but in terms of pure performance, I think that he showed this race what he can do. And like we talk about Antonelli, about how he's not like his performance and pace compared to Russell wasn't really there. Or it was equal or slightly less than. But I think that if you put Behrman's performance today into Kimi Antonelli's car, I think you get a much more on-merit performance. I think that Behrman was pretty much flawless, and he's one of the only drivers we've seen who has put in genuine, like, maybe not 10 out of 10 performances, but 9 out of 10 performances, or 9.5 out of 10 performances in midfield cars. Probably the first time since maybe Sebastian Vettel or whatever, since we've properly seen that. And it's annoying now because Hamilton is starting to perform in that Ferrari. What are Ferrari going to do? Because they, if Hamilton genuinely is good now, they can't get rid of him. We're just going to have a situation like we had with George Russell, where George Russell spends 3 years in a car.
I think that's exactly what happens. Behrman is stuck for 3 years at Haas, and you wait.
Yeah. And as for Ocon, I mean,
he can't leave. where would he go? McLaren's taken. Red Bull, if they want to get rid of Hadjar, but otherwise Mercedes are taken and Ferrari are obviously taken. So
Yeah, I mean, if Piastri leaves Ferrari, that leaves McLaren for a team like Ferrari, that could open a window, but I don't think it'd happen as much. Quick level, just get to Ocon. What is he doing? Like, he finished 11th in Australia, and today he decided to perform a GIGN house raid on Colapinto's side pod for no apparent reason. Yeah, I don't know what
he
he's doing.
apologized, and that's the only credit I'll give him.
Yeah,
for
he owned up
that.
to it.
Yeah. Let me just ruin a guy's race and potentially his entire career, and I'll just apologize for it. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah. Why are you going for that move? Like yes. What? Like when you see the gap open, you sort of think, oh, I could go.
Desperation is the reason when your 19-year-old teammate is absolutely schooling you.
It's you can put. So I'm going to give you more work to call. I put out a tweet that explained that in slightly different terms, and that is quite a funny tweet in my opinion. But yeah, he locked his rears, which is what eventually put him into competition. How do you lock your rears going into turn 2 at China? Is genuinely Ocon is an enigma.
Was it
a year.
was it a driver mistake or was it another rears locked because of?
No. It was a driver mistake. He tried to go for Colapinto was sort of closing in to the like the apex of that turn 1 part of the turn, like the end of the turn 1 part, and Gasly and Ocon just sort of tried to put his car up the inside, and then halfway through, when he wasn't even alongside still, he realized that, oh no, the gap is going to close, and just sort of braked and panicked, and the car, and he sort of lost control, probably locked all fours for a moment, and so he just sort of,
move. That's the kind of move that happens when you realize you are in the hot seat to leave the sport.
Yeah.
When you do 22 drivers.
Yeah. It kind of looked like when, I don't know, people who have gone go-karting can probably relate to when somebody is definitely slower, but they're just fast enough to keep you behind. And so you try to go for like some move into a corner, and halfway through you realize it's not happening. And so you have to brake, and you sort of lose control. And then even if you can keep control, it looks very dramatic that you have to like correct all over the place as well as sliding through the track. So yeah, Ocon is just highly questionable.
Nedzo smiling there is kind of implying that he's the local Ocon at his.
You can see that trophy in the background, that number 3 trophy. I got that from doing exactly that in a race. I qualified 5th, got a great start, got to P2 at turn 1, and literally for the entire rest of this 30-minute race, holding up everyone in a massive 5-car train because I was just fast enough to keep them behind and just good enough to keep them behind with racecraft.
Well done for the Nedzo wagon. Ocon did win Formula 3 in 2015 against Verstappen, so like there's.
Yeah, but I have one working arm. What does he have?
I will not say what I'm thinking about that. But Chizzy, because Mr. Nedzo went on about Haas, you have been delegated as the official Alpine correspondent. So what did you make of Gasly and Colapinto's race? Because honestly, Alpine in China, I think they impressed a lot, and credit needs to go to them for that.
Yeah, I think Alpine were probably the biggest disappointment in Australia because everybody expected them to be at the top of the midfield, and then instead Gasly barely managed to scrape a point, I think, and Colapinto was nowhere. I mean, he did that save at the start, so he was excused for everything he did at the rest of the weekend. But then in China, I think Gasly definitely showed that I predicted that at the beginning of the season there's going to be a battle for the king of the midfield between Berman and Gasly, and I think we got the first edition of that at the second race already, and I think we're going to see a lot more of Berman and Gasly in whatever is the leading position for the midfield, and then Ocon and Colapinto kind of further behind. And then Colapinto finally managed to give me a reason to point to that. Yeah, this is why he deserved to be in F1, because I really don't think you could have made an argument, even with his 2024 races, that he deserved to be in F1. He was never really good, and then he crashed a lot as well. So finally, he managed to do something good, and even with Ocon hampering him with that crash, if that didn't happen, he would have definitely gotten 9th from Sainz. But there was a 20-second gap between Sainz and Hadjar So I don't think this made too big of a difference in the end. But yeah, really, really impressed with Colapinto and then just Alpine overall.
I think you're
What do
being a
you
bit
think,
harsh.
Nedzo?
I was going to say, I think you're being a bit harsh on Colapinto's 2024. I know he was against F1's only female driver, but he was very good against Albon in 24. You have to admit he had like 2 races of experience, and yet he did more than Logan Sargent did in 37 races. And yeah, he crashed a bit, but I'd rather a driver that crashes a lot and does well in when they're not crashing than someone who crashes a lot and is shit the rest of the time, like Sargent, like Doohan. All of those guys. Plus, he's a Latin American twink, so he could finish last in every race, and I'd still want him in F1.
Also, by the way, if you're a listener and you're offended by Nedzo calling Albon a female driver and you think that's an insult, that's you thinking that being a female driver is an insult. We are just saying that being a female driver has a different skill set that can make you get into Formula One. Thank you, Shizzy.
Yeah, I was just meant to say that what Nedzo said is definitely not a product of him being the biggest fan of Pastor Maldonado, not at all. But yeah, even then, if your sort of basis is that well, he was better than Logan Sargent, then that doesn't really tell me much. Like, oh good, you were better than Nicolas Latifi, you were better than Nikita Mazepin. What am I supposed to do with that information? You made it to F1, so you should be automatically better than all of those people. So yeah, that's what I think of Colapinto. And then I guess we should move on to.
Yes, let's move on to another group of 2 teams that I've created, which is Audi and Williams, whereby, Williams did worse than Audi, but none of them made it into Q3. But for the race, they were in the similar position of one driver not starting and one driver starting and nearly making the points in the case of Audi, and did make the points in the case of Carlos Sainz for Williams, with a very good stint on the hard tire. So there is some solace for Williams fans, but I don't think they'll be happy with that because, man, Williams this year, people are disappointed with Aston, but I think that deep down, a lot of people thought that either Aston would be a front runner or a backmarker. Williams, the things that James Vowles said to sponsors and said on podcasts all year, it was, you would think that they were going to be Williams 1996. And they haven't made it out of Q3 in China. So, and obviously behind them are Cadillac and Aston, who aren't even racing in Formula One. So, yeah, Audi and Williams, good for Audi again, points for Williams, but I'd still say I'm more convinced with Audi so far.
If you heard what James Vowles was saying, you would think that he will be performing lap dances for Toto Wolff and George Russell on the podiums in all the races, given on what he was saying. The worst part is they have a Mercedes engine. They have all of the parts in place to have a fantastic car, a fantastic machinery. They have Carlos Sainz. They have Alex Albon, who I suppose can hand out the tea and motivate everyone and be like the motivational support for everyone who's actually good at their job.
And he's good at developing the car, let's be honest.
But regardless, this is shocking. Like, I can't speak it. It's just because I don't have anything to say that isn't completely negative and just.
Well, there's 4 points. That's positive.
Yeah, but when you say we've binned off the last 3 years of development to get to this point and you're getting points, that's not good enough. And you have all of the pieces in place to do this, and you've developed. But
also, they binned off the last 3 years, and also you go off publicly so proudly and so confidently telling everyone that you are going to be performing at the top with those 2 excellent drivers that you have in Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. His words, not mine. And then you pull up at China and you're P17 and P18 by far, like with no controversy.
It's the prime example of just looking forward and saying, if we in 6 races time we're going to be fastest on the grid. It's like, yeah, but everyone else is going to develop as well, so it's just going to all balance out. You can say all these things you want, but it's just not going to be the case. And yeah, Williams. Audi I think are definitely better because they are basically just Sauber reskins. That's essentially what they are. I mean, was it Bortoleto? Was it Bortoleto or was it Hulkenberg who didn't start? I forget because they're just so forgettable.
Bortoleto didn't start.
Bortoleto this time.
Yeah, Hulkenberg did nothing. I still think that Hulkenberg has proven what I thought last year, that he's pretty much the worst driver in Formula One right now, just because he's not.
Worst.
He was last year, I think, arguably.
Worst driver.
No, Colapinto was definitely worse than him, and Tsunoda was
Hulkenberg
definitely
was
worse
the
than him.
worst.
Okay. Tsunoda. Okay, I'll admit.
Colapinto, no way you're putting Colapinto
I'll
above
have to
him.
get my
Did you see
rankings
how
out.
long? Sorry, did you see how Lance Stroll was performing last year? I take points. I'm happy to take points on Lance in general. Like he's not the piece of trash that people say he is. But last year, 24-0 qualifying
Right, more
against a
work for Colin. I
74-year-old
will
man.
send him after this recording. I will send him the screenshot of my ranking 2025 drivers that I made at the end of the year. But I'm pretty sure Hulkenberg was at least bottom 3, bottom 4. I still think he's bottom 3, bottom 4 drivers in Formula One at the moment. He's just he used to be really good in qualifying and be good 5 races a year and be genuinely generational 5 races a year. But now he's barely 1 or 2, and he's just kind of he's just there. He's clearly past his best. And
I'm looking forward to the comments on this because if someone has reached this point in the podcast, we will know because they will be saying what is Nedzo saying. So good way to know where people have listened to. To be fair,
yes,
Yeah.
what do you make about it, Jesse?
Audi are bit of a the most nothing burger team on the grid, I think, because they have two drivers, and they the only thing that's interesting about them is that they have their own engine, and it seems to be solid, despite them building it with seemingly no experience. So that's really interesting. But otherwise, an incredibly mid team. But yeah, I just have things to say on Williams mostly because there's nothing to say about Audi. And the thing that's interesting about Williams is that in qualifying, welcome back 2010, because we once again have 3 teams who are just slowest by far in Audi, Aston, and in Williams, Aston, and Cadillac. And so unless somebody fails to literally fails to set a lap time, we are going to have a guaranteed Q1 elimination group, basically. And then, I think the fact that Sainz got points is incredibly impressive from a driver standpoint. And the way he did that is probably the most disappointing way, because he just stayed out of trouble, ran his own race, never got into battles, ignored everything that happened, and just tried to make sure that in the end the time game would be on his part. And he got incredibly lucky with Colapinto getting spun around, and then both Mercedes completely screwed Colapinto with the lapping. He lost more than a second both times when they were lapped by the Mercedes. So I think he's really lucky to get that 9th place, and I'm incredibly surprised that Hülkenberg didn't catch him because Lindblad, Ocon, okay, they got into accidents, they had bad weekends, but then what is Hülkenberg doing? So I'm really disappointed in Hülkenberg, and if he starts really falling off, I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised if that started to happen. But yeah, I mean, let's not forget.
He's completed his entire career objective of getting a podium now. So to be fair, it's hard to care about him anymore. He had this entire gimmick going, and it's done now.
Yeah, I mean, if Hülkenberg retires at the end of the year, I think this slowly starts to be a given that Hülkenberg might retire at the end of the year. And maybe this was the first sign, but also let's be a bit generous to him. He didn't race in Australia at all, and because the car broke down, so this was his first time racing a full race distance. So some mitigating circumstances to be given, but still not impressed with his performance.
Yeah, well, thankfully for underperformers at the moment, you know that there are going to be 4 cars at least behind you, because let's get into our backmarkers, Aston Martin and Cadillac. Or should I say Cadillac and Aston Martin, because somehow Cadillac have finished ahead of Aston Martin this weekend. It somehow got worse for Aston Martin. We heard a lot in pre-season that there were vibrations that could have damaged the drivers' bodies, and I think a lot of fans were hopeful that this was Adrian Newey kind of making things worse in the hope that there could be some regulations change or they would be allowed to make more changes to the cars. So a lot of people like, it can't be that bad. And Alonso today retired because of the vibrations in his hands. And if you think about Lance Stroll, who had the issues with his wrists in the last 2 and 3 years, I think it probably is even worse for Lance. One redeeming point is that Alonso's start again today was insane. He was P9 at the end of lap 1. Go figure how he did that. I haven't seen the video yet, but made up 7 positions or 8. Well, so 7 or 8 positions. And then by the end of lap 4, he was P14 again. And then at the safety car restart, he also lost 5 positions in 1 lap. There's a really funny video you can find of Cadillac overtaking him, and he's clapping down the back straight. It's incredible.
Waving him by rather than clapping. He's just waving at him.
He's waving back.
Yeah, good job. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, well done to you. So that's Alonso at his prime, which is not racing. It's just raging, sadly, for our entertainment. And yeah, Cadillac, I wouldn't say they improved, but they finished and they beat Aston Martin. So I guess they did improve if you're looking at it that way.
I mean, if like Cadillac got a double finish, and a lot of teams this year cannot say that, like that they managed to get both cars to finish the race. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think except for Haas, Alpine, Visa RB, and Ferrari and Mercedes, all the other teams still are yet to get a double finish, except for Cadillac. So really good on them for managing to do that. They also seemingly improved a lot pace-wise. They managed to, I think, Bottas beat Stroll in qualifying, which is huge, and then Bottas finished P13. So second ever race for a completely new team, P13. Maybe 5-6 cars retired, but
it does feel a bit like the P13s that new teams would get in the 90s, where it's 10 teams retire and then you get P13 3 laps down.
Yeah, basically. I mean, if the race had gone full distance without a safety car, I still don't think they would have been lapped twice. So I think maybe lapped twice, but not 3 times like in Australia. So definitely a big improvement. And then from Aston Martin, Stroll's car just gave up, and then interestingly, the obviously Alonso just he had no problems. He just he said that the car was shaking and vibrating so bad that he couldn't feel his hands and legs. At that point, he decided to retire, because when you are literally the slowest guy on track and being passed by Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez in Cadillacs, then I don't blame him for retiring, especially since, I mean, there's videos of him when he enters the long back straight, he gets his hands off of the steering wheel and just rests like one hand on it to sort of keep the car straight. And otherwise, because he can't keep his hands in there because the vibration really is that bad. So
honestly, that's what I was doing the first time I did proper karting in the UK, because I wasn't used at all to like the speed of it. I had no idea it would be like that bumpy. So like down the back straight, I would just like put my hands on the wheel, because obviously it's vibrating so much. But that's me having literally no experience in a car that's meant for like big competitions. So yeah, him as a Formula One driver doing it on his Aston is insane.
I will say, when I'm doing my go-kart races, and if we ever get like a red flag or a yellow flag period, I will take my hands off the wheel and flick them a little bit just to get the blood flowing back into them. But that's probably because I have one less working arm than everyone else.
Yeah, I'm sure that is. And any thoughts on Cadillac and Aston quickly?
Not really. They just kind of they are. I was going to say F1.5, but that indicates that they're like midfield teams. While that
they're F1.75.
What about F2 or F2.5?
In
terms of reliability, maybe F2 definitely.
I mean, I swear, Cadillac, by the way, make their cars out of paper mache or like toothpicks, because all the parts just fall off. It's crazy. It's like a fucking larder from the 1970s. Everything's just falling apart.
You're talking about whether it's Formula 2. There's that 2014 Spanish Grand Prix where the Formula 2 cars outqualified the Caterhams to the Mauritius. I did think this year that might happen if Cadillac and some other backmarker were too bad. I did think in the first or second race we might see something like that happen. That hasn't happened. So yeah, but yeah, well that brings the review of the teams to a close. But very quickly, without explanation, Chizzy and Nedzo, your top three of the race and your flop of the race.
Okay, so my top three of the race would probably be Antonelli, Behrman, and Gasly.
Nedzo?
I'm going to say Behrman. I'm going to say Gasly, and I'm going to say, who else should I say? I'm going to say Colapinto.
Interesting. I feel like there's no way to not put Behrman, Gasly, and Antonelli in there. Well, who's your flop of the race, Chizzy and Nedzo? Reminder for Chizzy that you don't have to say a driver. You can say anything related to a race weekend.
I know. I think flop is definitely Verstappen's race start, McLaren as a whole, and then just Aston Martin, like just as a whole, just complete flop.
I think the flop of the race is going to be Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri at the McLaren Technology Centre with cement blocks in their hands, jumping into the pond at the McLaren Technology Centre.
That's a really good one. I'm also going to say Aston Martin because, yeah, I'm too disappointed by what's going on. And also, I didn't say it in the Aston Martin pod, but I feel like Alonso could be really good with this kind of car, gimmicky car with a lot of focus on deployment. Because one of the best things he had going for him at Ferrari was how he was managing his curse. That's always how he overtook and how he had those insane starts. So I feel like we're missing out on not seeing Alonso in a top car in this era because I think he would have done well. But yeah, well, thanks a lot for joining me, Chizzy and Nedzo. There was no Peter Brook today, but I think we did really well. Really like the chemistry as well. So
you can do a bassoon
I hope you guys
at the end here. Just like a
sorry.
You can do a bassoon impression at the end here. Just go.
Honestly, if you had said that before, I could have thought about it. I'm not going to improvise that. But... So yeah, it was really nice. I think we can definitely have the three of us for future episodes. I just want to thank our members, Lysenko, Javad Ahmadov, Oscar Vaglun, Barak Choskun, Gitul Bedel, Elizabeth Thurn, Chris Adair, and Blue Guy for being our members and our good supporters of the channel. This was the DRS Train podcast. You can follow us on X, Spotify, YouTube, subscribe, comment, and just leave any kind of support. We really value it. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining me, Nedzo and Chizzy.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.